Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video, which is our Back to Basics with Microsoft Flight Simulator video 3. In this video, we're trying out a different aircraft. In fact, we're in the Grand Caravan. So carrying on from video 1 and 2, it's imperative you go and watch those videos first, because we'll be practicing some of the techniques and procedures we learned in those videos. I'll link video 1 in the top right for you. In this video, like I said, we're flying the Grand Caravan. We're gonna fly it up, take her off, trim her out, then go through some basic autopilot techniques following on from our previous videos. And we're going to fly her over to Gatwick Airport and hopefully land her safely. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. Okay, we're going to start off on the main homepage. This time, by the way, I'm back on the PC. I'm alternating the videos, so it'll be PC, Xbox. Whatever you learn here, you can carry over to the Xbox version as well. The same procedures will work on either the PC or Xbox. Anyway, on the main homepage, let's go to World Map. Can you guess where we're taking off from? Not going to be difficult to work out watching my videos. Going to go over to London City Airport. Click on the main icon, using my mouse in this case, so left click, London City, and set as departure. I'm going to come down, zoom out so I can see Gatwick Airport. I'm going to zoom in, left click Gatwick. And don't click anything, just click zoom to details. Zoom to details on Gatwick Airport, runway 08 left. So we're going to click on that, left click on that, to set up a arrival to land at runway 08 left. And one other thing we're going to do, we're just going to zoom out, get past Heathrow. There's Windsor Castle point of interest. So we're going to click on that, left click, and click add. Now, because we're flying the Grand Caravan, by the way, ensure that you got the Grand Caravan chosen for this flight. It's going to be a lot quicker than it would be in the Cessna 172, as you'll see. Flight conditions, going to go over to flight conditions. I've got it on clear skies. Practice with clear skies first before you go to live weather, which has a bit more dynamic weather. Practice on clear skies. When you've got it down on clear skies, then go to live weather and goodness knows what. So that's our flight plan set up with the Cessna Grand Caravan chosen. Let's go fly. So we're at runway 27 at London City Airport in the Grand Caravan with the very nice skin that Aces Down 1 designed for me. I particularly like it on the Grand Caravan. Go and watch his channel, I'll link it in the top right. Love that skin, Aces. Anyway, let's jump into the aircraft. So with the Grand Caravan, I've chosen this one because the G1000s are very similar to the Cessna 172, left and right, but the controls and autopilots are in different places. And this is the reason I'm choosing this for video 3, getting used to a different aircraft, getting used to where the different controls are in the Grand Caravan in this case. This bank here, so if I go down to my instrument views, this middle bank here is all your autopilot controls which we'll be using in this video. In particular, we'll be using the main autopilot button, which is here, to turn the autopilot on. We'll be using the nav button, which is here, to follow our course. We'll be doing that later. First, we're going to learn how to trim the aircraft and get a feel for it. But autopilot and nav, get familiar with where they are. And also, possibly, if I trimmed out the aircraft correctly, if I click autopilot, it won't climb because it'll be in neutral trim. So it won't be hopefully rising or descending. We'll have to see. If it's descending slightly and you click autopilot, it will follow that profile. But we may have to click and add an extra step here, vertical speed, just to increase our vertical speed up our climb. We'll see when we come to that, but get familiar with all the autopilot buttons here. Another thing to get familiar with is to set our autopilot altitude. The select knob is different here in the Grand Caravan than it is in the Cessna 172. It just goes up in increments of 100, I believe. So if I mouse up on that to change our assigned autopilot altitude, go and watch video 1 and 2 for more information on that. If I mouse up, you'll see it will, oops. The autopilot assigned altitude will increase in increments of 100, so slightly different. So I'm going to mouse up to set our assigned altitude, what I want the autopilot to climb to 1,200 feet. And that's fine, I've got it all assigned there. So when I click autopilot later, that's the altitude I want it to climb at, this aircraft, and maintain. Okay, and there's just one other thing to be aware of here. Come back up to my normal view. Flaps, if you look out your left and right window, so when you deploy flaps, so if I've got a switch assigned on my Logitech flight yacht system here. I'm using a switch in this case. If I go flaps 1, you can see a shadow, so you can kind of see the flaps have deployed, but you can't physically see them, or you'll struggle to see them looking out the windows in this aircraft because the sort of mainframe or the frame of the aircraft is in the way. So another way of doing this is actually just panning my view down. Here's the flap switch. I can see I've got it in flaps 1 position, or first stage of flaps. I'll go full flaps and you can see the flaps have moved down to full flaps. I'll click it all the way back up and now I can see I've got flaps, no flaps deployed. So if you can't see your flaps out the window, physically see them to see if they've deployed, take a look at your switch to see what position it's in. First stage, seems to be only 2 stages in this aircraft, first stage and second stage. And I'll take them all the way back up because we don't need flaps to take off. Okay, so with the familiarity out of the way, get familiar with the aircraft. The G1000s are quite obvious, very similar to the Cessna 172 or 172 with the G1000s. But with all the rest, I know where the autopilot buttons are. Let's go and take her up for a fly. Okay, like I said, on this part, we're just going to get used to trimming first before we touch autopilot. So I'm going to go full throttle. Release the parking brake. I find that around 70 knots in the Grand Caravan is a good takeoff and landing speed, in fact. Or approach to landing, at least. So I'm going to wait till we're around 70 knots. That will do. Pull up gently. Like video 1, I'm going to trim the aircraft up so I can relieve pressure on the yoke. Go and watch video 1 for tips on trimming. I'm dabbing the trim. Going to bring my throttle back to stop the aircraft flashing red here. I've got kind of like an over rev warning. Move the mouse out of the way. So I'm just dabbing trim to try and get her now into level flight. I don't want to climb to my 1,200 feet yet. I'll let autopilot take care of that for us. But I'm just trimming up and down, dabbing it, just to trim the aircraft out. So I'm just trimming down now, dabbing it, slightly longer than a click, a little less than a second, or around a second. Just going to bring my throttle back slightly, because I'm looking at this marker, which is showing me whether I'm climbing or descending. I'm climbing at the moment. So I'll just trim down, dabbing trim. Taking it nice and easy just to show you my techniques here as well. You can see I've done it a little bit too much there. Maybe trim, click a couple of times up and once down. You can see we're pretty much... I'm not going to chase it. Once I've clicked it, or dabbed it, I'm going to let it settle. I can get a feeling whether it's in an up or down profile for trim. You get a feeling for it after a while. Maybe a little less throttle there, just to put us in level flight. And this is important, get used to it. Keep an eye on your course as well, try and stay roughly on course. And that will pretty much do. I can see we're pretty much coming into level flight now. Maybe just one click down on the trim. So I'm just getting used to it, especially if you've been flying just the Cessna 172. It's quite similar. There you go, we're pretty much in level flight. So I can click the autopilot. Now, click the autopilot button, which I showed you before. Click on nav. In fact, when I clicked autopilot, what's it doing? Is it leveling out? It might be actually just leveling out. So yeah, in this case, because I had the aircraft very well trimmed out, it's not climbing for us now. It's not climbing to that 1,200 feet. So if you come on this case, if you're doing this flight and yours happens to behave the same way, where it's not climbing to our 1,200 feet, our autopilot assigned altitude, click on the vertical speed button, which is here in the Grand Caravan. Just click that once, and then mouse down to increase your climb on the vertical speed there. I'm telling the autopilot to climb at 200 feet per minute. I'll mouse down once more, 300 feet per minute will do. And it will slowly climb us to that 1,200 feet altitude. And once it gets there, it will maintain it. Slightly different to the other videos, that's an extra step. But if you trimmed it out well enough, if you were in the same position I was there, where it's not climbing or descending, it's just in level flight, you will have to click the vertical speed like I just showed you, and then mouse down to increase your climb rate so it climbs to 1,200 feet. And now you can see it's going to maintain that altitude and carry us on along our merry way. Now then, because I was slightly off course there, this is interesting. I'll have to click the autopilot off, bring her back round to this purple line. If this happens to you, this is what you'll have to do. Basically, the autopilot did lock onto our course because we were a little bit too far away from the line. I didn't keep an eye on that when I was trimming out. If that happens, just click your autopilot master off. Head back towards that purple Sion line here, whichever colour you want to call it. Don't worry about our altitude. Actually, I'm descending there, so I'm just going to trim out a little bit to make sure we're back in our sort of level flight while we're heading towards. So this is good practice. It's getting used to a different aircraft. In practice, this didn't happen to me. I was always close to that line where the autopilot locked onto it. This sort of GPS and nav locked onto it. Because we were a little bit further away, I had to click off autopilot. So I've turned autopilot off altogether. Once we get back towards it, I'm going to click back just the autopilot button. I've already got nav engaged, GPS engaged, so it should lock onto that line and follow us. We should follow the course around then. The autopilot will lock onto it and we should follow the course around. So once we get a little bit nearer, I'm probably close enough now, let's try it. Autopilot, left click. You can see now just GPS is flashing here. It means it's locked onto our course. And it will climb us back up to that 1,200 feet altitude and maintain us. At the same time following our course we set up before. So that was good practice. I'm not going to cut that and redo it, because the same thing might happen to yourself. All still very basic autopilot functions, but if you're a little bit too far away, it's worth repeating. If you're a little bit too far away from the autopilot line, from your course line that you set up, you will have to get nearer to it for the GPS, for the nav, the autopilot nav GPS to lock onto it. I hope that's clear. Okay, so we'll follow the course around, coming up to lovely Heathrow Airport. And I've got a bit of a story to share with you while we're flying along this course. It won't take us too long to fly along this course, really, but I'll share a story. I'm just going to mouse down to my flaps to make sure I don't have any flaps engaged currently, and I don't. I can see my flaps lever is all the way up. Bit of a story to share with you. Now, you probably noticed on my community page that I managed to acquire or pre-order the Velocity 1 flight yoke, which is a yoke that will work with the Xbox, in my case the Xbox Series S. So I'm very excited about that. Money's got out of my account. I got it on my credit card account, in fact. Got out of my account, so it's all looking good. And strangely, it looks like it's going to be released a week tomorrow, the 14th of November. Which is quite strange, but there you go. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Maybe I'll get it early, you never know. Just flying past lovely Heathrow Airport. I love Heathrow Airport in this simulator. It looks absolutely fantastic. Back on with the story. So, I knew when I planned when I were to acquire the Velocity 1 yoke that I would sell, people are going to cringe at this, I would sell my PlayStation 5. I got my PlayStation 5 at launch date in the UK. I had it pre-ordered when the orders went live. First orders for it went live, and I managed to get one. But I just didn't play the thing. I played it a handful of times, well, maybe 2 handfuls, maybe 10 times over the year I had it. Enjoyed it when I first got it for a couple of weeks, and then I hardly played it. And it was just wasting away. I kept it under cover, under kind of the cover that came with it, so dust wouldn't get onto it. And I just rarely played it, so I thought, look, okay, it's time to sell that. I got the Velocity 1 flight yoke. I could sell the PlayStation 5 and put the money back into my credit card accounts to pay off the expense that I paid for the Velocity 1 yoke. Now, the idea is that I would sell that to a shop called CEX. Anybody from the UK will know what CEX is. It's a second-hand shop where you go and sell your second-hand goods, and they mark up your goods and sell them at a ridiculous rate. Essentially, they had on their website they would buy your PlayStation 5 for £500. I'll just talk about what we're doing here at the moment. We're turning on now to our course towards Gatwick Airport, as you can see here. Anyway, they would buy your PlayStation 5 for £500. They'll probably haggle with you and knock the price down, because that's what CEX is like. And they would sell it for £700. So some poor sod would have to pay at least £700 for a second-hand PlayStation 5 that I had for a year. Even though I looked after it, I wasn't comfortable with that. So I telephoned my friend at Cash Converters, which is another second-hand shop, but ethically they seem a little bit better than CEX. Asked her whether they bought PlayStation 5s. They did, but they were only paying like £350 at the most, and they would sell them for about £500, £550, so a little bit more ethical than CEX, but they were going to buy it at less. And I said, no, I can't do that. Cut a long story short, she has a daughter who was looking for a PlayStation 5 for her boyfriend, so I agreed to sell it to them for the price I bought it at, £450. Now, a lot of people are going to say, oh, you should have sold it on eBay, you could have got £700, £800 for that. I would never have sold it. Ethically, I couldn't sell something that's worth £450 for £700, £800. That's already a year old. Ethically, I wouldn't do that. Didn't want to go on Fleabay. I don't like all the scams that are happening. I possibly could have sold it for £500 and could have got ripped off, or something could have happened. Didn't want all the hassle. So the moral of the story is that I sold it for the price I got it at, and it felt good to do that. And for somebody, I helped out a friend, and hopefully somebody is going to appreciate the PlayStation 5 more than I did. The only disadvantage is that it could come back on me, you know, if it breaks down within a week or two, which is not my fault. It was in perfect working condition. But if it goes wrong for them, they could come back to me and try and get their money back. I said to my friend, look, you know, it's in perfect working condition, leaving my hands. If something happens on their side, I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not going to go into the procedure of refunding money if they broke it, and they agree to that. They seemed very ethical, so fingers crossed. I'll keep you updated if something happens. That's enough of the story. So I felt good about selling it for the price I got it at. Felt good and moral. Let's get back to this flight, shall we? Just the story I wanted to share with you. Now, like video 2, we're going to set up a visual approach to runway 8 left at Gatwick Airport. If I range out, you can see this flight is going to plonk us straight onto the runway 08 left. So I'm going to set up a visual approach like we did last time. Go and look at video 2, I'll link it in the top right. The way to do this on the right G1000 using the NXI mod, that's important. Go and watch video 2 to refresh your memory. I'm going to click on the procedures button here, left click. Where it's got select approach flashing, I'm going to click enter here, down here, the button enter. And again, like video 2, I'm going to use the inner FMS knob. Scroll up on that so we get to visual 08 left, which is here. So visual 08 left is flashing. I'm going to press enter there, the button here. Doing it a bit quicker because we covered this in video 2. Going to use my FMS knob to scroll up on it. Inner FMS knob, scroll up on that till we get down to load, and that's flashing. And again, press enter down here. Don't worry about this writing comes up, it always comes up. Just click enter again. And there we go, we've set that part up. Get rid of this flight plan by clicking the FPL flight plan button, left click. Last step, like we did last time, go to procedures again, proc, left click, and activate approach. Press the enter button. And there you go, it's difficult to see here, but it's now altered our flight plan. It's given us a lead into the airport, so we'll come onto a straight where we can set up and configure our aircraft before we get to the runway for hopefully a good nice landing. All very simple, just like we did for video 2, only this time we're in the Grand Caravan. Once we get... what's this aircraft doing? It seems to be okay. By the way, this part of London, Greater London, looks fantastic, I've got to say. Once we get nearer to that, I'm going to decrease my throttle, decrease my speeds, maybe about halfway on my throttle unit, so I can get into flaps 1 position. You can just see the white taper on the speed ribbon. It's about 125, 126 knots in the Grand Caravan. That'll be our safe position to go to flaps, safe speed to go to flaps 1, or first stage of flaps. So all very good. Be interested to know your thoughts on my PlayStation 5 story. Yeah, I could have sold it for a lot more. Ethically, I would never do that, or wouldn't want to do that. So I think I've done the right thing there. Helped out a friend. Someone's appreciating the PlayStation 5. They got the bargain of the year. I really looked after that PlayStation 5. It looked new, leaving my hands. The box completely intact. Nothing wrong with it. So let's hope they enjoy it more. And they got a bargain, they got it at the retail price. Even though it's second hand, they still got it at the retail price. Hopefully done the right thing there. I'll have to see as the weeks go along. Okay, we're getting closer to straight. I'm going to increase my range. And again, it's good practice. Practice what I did before, the trim. If you're not close to your autopilot line, take it off autopilot, keep nav on, but take it off the autopilot by clicking autopilot. When you get closer to your line, click autopilot again, the autopilot should follow it. If you had it perfectly trimmed out, we went to vertical speed and increased our climb rate on our vertical speed to get the autopilot to maintain us to 1200 feet. Practice, practice, practice. When I take it off autopilot, when we get on our straight, I'm going to have to practice. I practiced it a few times in the Grand Caravan, but again, practice the landing. I'm going to slow us down, like I said, to about 125, 126 knots, about half throttle, more or less. Get us into flaps 1 speed, go to flaps 1 and then full flaps under autopilot control and try and get the speed to around 70 knots on the approach to landing and then follow the PAPI lights down to hopefully bring us down safely on the runway. And it's good, whatever you learn in one aircraft, like the Cessna 172, I'm very proficient with that. Whatever I've learnt in that, I can carry over to other aircrafts. This is very similar because of the G1000s, it's just the speeds and the handling which is slightly different. In other aircraft where they have different displays, I'm using similar procedures, trimming, speed, getting a feel for the aircraft, learning the aircraft. Right, okay, we are coming on our straight leg here. I'm going to zoom in. I'll keep it there. Wasn't paying attention. I'll slow us down because we're now turning onto our straight. I should have done this before. Too busy talking. So slow us down to flaps 1 speed. Still got time, don't worry. You can see we get into that white taper. I can go to flaps 1 now. Check on my flaps lever. I can see it's gone to the first stage of flaps. First stage of flaps. There's the airport, the runway in front of us. I'll let the aircraft configure itself for an approach to that so it's not moving left or right. Straight onto the runway effectively. Which we'll do there. I'm going to click the autopilot button. I've turned off autopilot. I've got control of the aircraft now. I'm going to throttle down. Actually going to go down to flaps 2. And trim just to compensate for that flare you get with flaps. Just going to mouse down, pad my view down. And yeah, I can see I'm in full flaps configuration there. Move that mouse out of the way. Don't want that interfering. A bit high on the PAPI lights, that's okay. I'll control this now, get back on the centre line. Control it now with my throttle, so I'm just decreasing my throttle to get the PAPI lights. 2 red, 2 whites is what I'm after. Don't want to decrease speed too much because I'll end up going under. I'd rather be high with the PAPI lights than low, and I can see the runway quite clearly in front of me. So you know what, that's a decent approach to the runway. Just decrease my speed a little bit more there, the throttle rather, a little bit more. Increase if I feel I'm going too low. That's fine. Once I'm over the runway, I shall decrease my throttle, like so. Get that speed coming down by floating over the runway. And I'm just going to let the aircraft touch down relatively gently. It's a heavy aircraft, the Caravan, so don't worry if it comes down with a little bit more of a thud than the 172. Oh, I've got the taxi ribbon on, never mind. Brake, parking brakes on, jump outside, and there you go. So we've been practicing and getting familiar with a different aircraft, the trimming, the autopilot, finding out where the different autopilot buttons are, and then configuring it for a landing and landing relatively safely at Gatwick Airport. Practice, practice, practice. Once you got familiar and comfortable with the 172, practice with the Grand Caravan would be my suggestion. But let me know your thoughts. Give the video a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for many more videos in this series on the way. And I'll see you soon.